Hi everyone and welcome to SOLIDWORKS Model Mania made with Fusion 360. And today we are going to take up the challenge of Model Mania year 2004. Let's get started. I'm going to hit Ctrl N to create a new design. I'm looking at the top view of our 2D drawing. And let's start off by creating the sketch for this. I'm going to hit L for line and let's sketch on our XY plane, selecting this plane. Next, let me create a line from here going here. Hit D for dimension and let's have the length of this line to be 125. Hitting escape. Next, I'd like to place the midpoint of this line coincident with our origin. So selecting midpoint, selecting this horizontal line and our origin. Hitting escape. Let's bring over our line once more, creating a line from here, going here, double left click, from this endpoint, going to this point, hitting escape. Next, I'm going to hit S for our shortcuts, typing ARC, and I'm looking for a 3-point arc. Creating a 3-point arc by left clicking at this endpoint, and the left click anywhere here. And lastly, I would like to have a vertical reference here coming from the center or middle. Hitting escape, hitting L for line, selecting our origin, left click here and double left click. Hitting escape, let me turn this into a construction entity by hitting X or heading to our sketch palette and selecting or enabling construction. Let's add some dimensions, so hitting D for dimension. Let's start off by selecting this arc. The radius for this is 75. And notice this sketch should be symmetrical. And to do that, we're going to grab our symmetry constraint. So heading up to constraints, selecting symmetry. I want this point and this point symmetrical with respect to our vertical construction line. So selecting this last, left click, hitting escape, and let's grab our dimension once more. Next, selecting this horizontal line and this slanted line. Notice at the drawing it's 15. And so here it will be 90 plus 15. For the beginners out there, I'm just showing to you that we can perform mathematical operations inside the dimension dialog box. Hitting enter. The reason is this one is 90 and if you add this up, this will be 15. Next, let's select this origin, and to select the midpoint of this arc, I'm going to hit Shift. Once more, holding Shift and hovering over our arc. Notice this triangle, that means it's the midpoint. Left click and left click here to place our dimension. Key in 100. Hitting enter. Next, I prefer creating the sketch for the extruded feature here. So hitting O for offset, and notice the offset distance is 25. So with chain selection enabled, I'm going to select our sketch curves, move this slider, and to be exact, I'm going to key in 25. Hitting enter. And I want this lines extended up to our horizontal line. Let me grab our shortcuts once more, hitting S, typing EX and selecting Extend. I'm going to select this line and this line. Notice I accidentally extended this line as well. Hitting Escape and hitting T for trim. Let me trim this excess line segment, this line as well, and this line. Next, let's grab our dimension tool, dimension this. Once more, the distance to be 25. Same with this side as well. Left click. And instead of hitting enter, I want this value to be the same with this dimension, which is D6. So with this currently highlighted, I'm going to select this dimension, which makes them both equal. Hitting enter, selecting this arc and this arc. Left click here and let's select this dimension, which is D6 once more. Hitting enter and hitting escape. Selecting finish sketch. Next, I'm going to focus on our front view. Hitting L once more and let's sketch on our XZ plane. Left click here. Let's create another arc instead of a line. Hitting escape and hitting S once more for shortcuts. Typing ARC. Selecting 3-point arc. Creating an arc from here. Left click here. Left click. Left click here. Left click. And left click. Hitting escape. Let's add some dimensions. So hitting D. Let's start off with this arc. Let me place them here. Key in 170. This arc to be 160. And for the center points of this arc, they should be both coincident or concentric. I'm going to hit escape. Let me select coincident, selecting this center point and this center point. Hitting escape and let's align the center point vertically with our origin. Selecting horizontal, vertical, selecting our origin and this center point. And the distance between our origin or the flat surface of our model to be 120. Once more, hitting D, selecting this origin, our center point, place the dimension here, key in 120. Hitting escape. In addition, make sure that this arc's endpoint goes way past this points. Okay? And before we exit sketch mode, notice these dimensions, I think, will be repeated on our next sketch. So with that in mind, I want you to take note of this dimensions ID, which is 170, which is D9, D10, and D11. In addition, I have gone ahead and taken note of this dimensions and their corresponding dimension IDs. Let's now select Finish Sketch. Moving forward, let's focus on section AA. Let's enter sketch mode once more. And this time, we're going to sketch on YZ. And with YZ selected, I'm going to right-click and select Create Sketch. Let's create those two arcs once more, hitting S. For shortcuts, typing ARC, selecting 3-point arc. Left-click here. Left-click here. Left-click. Left-click here. left click here, and left click. Hitting escape, and notice I have accidentally created a tangent constraint. Let me select this and delete. Hit D for dimension. Let's start off with this outer one. Left click here. Let's reuse the dimension IDs we have noted. So for 170, it's D9. Hitting enter. This one to be 160 to be D10. Let's zoom out, hit escape, select these two center points, right click, and let's have them coincident with each other. Select our horizontal vertical constraint. I want the center point aligned to our origin vertically. Select our origin, but first let me hit D for dimension. And our center point, left click here, and let's reuse those dimension IDs, D11, hitting enter, hitting escape, or you may project the center point of this arcs and just add coincident. Once more, there are many ways to model this challenge. Heading back to right view, and I want to align these two center points vertically with our origin. Selecting horizontal vertical, let's select this arcs and point and our origin. Selecting this point and our origin. Hitting escape, and let's now select finish sketch. Let's start extruding, but first let me change our tab to surface, and let's now select extrude. Our intent here is to extrude this feature. Let me disable chaining, and for our first profile, let me select this line, this arc, and this line. Let's pull this up, and I prefer under extent, selecting to object, the extrusion to be up to this point. Selecting OK. Next, let's sweep this arc as a surface, but first let me turn on the visibility of sketch 3. Heading to our create panel, selecting sweep. For the profile, it will be this arc, and for the path, it will be this path. Let me extend this up to here. Operation New Body, and selecting OK. And notice on our Bodies folder, we have now two surface bodies. Next, let's extrude another sketch. So let me turn on the visibility of sketch 1. Heading over to extrude. Once more, under the surface workspace, let's disable chaining and select this line, pull this up, or under extent, let me select to object, and I want this to be up to this point. Operation New Body, and selecting OK. So notice we now have our third surface body. Moving forward, let's trim out excess surfaces. Heading up to modify and selecting trim. The mindset for trim is, let's say my intent here is to remove this surface, And to do that, I will be using this as a tool. Our first selection will be the trim tool. I will use this surface to trim out this surface. So my second selection will be this highlighted surface. Selecting this and hit OK. Notice our recent command was trim, and instead of heading up here and selecting trim once more, I can right click, and from that we can head up to select repeat trim. Inspecting. Let me now trim this piece out with this surface as the trimming tool, selecting this. And notice as I hover over here, this highlights in red, and this one. Selecting OK. Right click once more, selecting repeat trim. I would like to remove this surface. With that in mind, I will be using this as our trim tool and this surface to be removed. Selecting this, selecting OK. And obviously, to remove out this surface, our trimming tool will be this face or surface. So right click, selecting repeat trim, this surface to be our trimming tool, and this to be trimmed out. Left click and left click here. Selecting OK. Let me turn off the visibility of our sketch 1 and sketch 3. Next, let's combine these three surfaces. And to do that, we need stitch. So I'm going to head up and select stitch. I'm going to create a window selection to select all of these three surface bodies, leaving the defaults and selecting OK. And finally, we have to patch this hole up. Let's select this edge, holding Control, selecting this edge and this edge. And under Create, we're going to select Patch. Inspecting and selecting OK. Once more, Operation to be New Body. And finally, let's merge these two surfaces by selecting Stitch once more, creating a window selection to select them both, leaving the defaults, selecting OK. And notice, from a surface body, it now turned into a solid body. Moving forward, let's apply drafts to these faces. Hitting S for shortcuts, typing DR and selecting draft. And for the type, it will be parting line. Let's define the faces first. Left click here, selecting these three faces. For the pull direction, let me select our XY plane and have this arrow pointing downward by selecting flip pull direction. For the parting tool, let me select this three edges, holding Control. Make sure tangent chain is enabled. For the parting line type, it will be move. And for the direction, we are only concerned with the angle above. And for the fixed edges, we're going to select these three edges. For the angle, keying in -15. Let's inspect, heading to top view. So notice this line should be aligning with our sketch 1. So let me turn off and turn on our body. And we are right on target, and let's now select OK. Turning off the visibility of sketch 1. Moving forward, let's create the second prominent feature of this model. Let me turn on the visibility of sketch 1 and sketch 3. Head up to Create under Surface, selecting Extrude. For the profile, let's select this profiles, but first let me disable chaining, selecting this line, this arc, and this line. Pull this arrow up. Under Extend, let's have this at 2 object, and once more this will be up to this point. And let's add the taper angle as well. This one should be -15. Operation New Body. And from here, we will be creating a new surface body. Let's turn on the visibility of sketch 2. Turn off the visibility of our solid body. Head to Create under Surface, selecting Sweep. For the profile, it will be our second arc. The path to be the one intersecting our second arc, which is this arc. I'm okay with this distance. Selecting OK. Let's grab our Extrude tool once more. And disable chaining, selecting this line. Once more, let's utilize Extend to Object. Selecting this point. And selecting OK. From here, let's now trim some excess surfaces out. But first, let me turn off the visibility of our sketches. Heading to Modify, selecting Trim. I want this surface to trim out this surface. Selecting OK. Right click, repeating Trim. I want to remove this surface. And I'm going to use this surface as the trimming tool to remove this piece out. Selecting OK. Right click once more, selecting Repeat Trim. I would like to trim out this piece, selecting this Body 7 as our trimming tool. Selecting this piece and this piece. Selecting OK. I want to trim out this excess surface as well. Right click, selecting Repeat Trim. Selecting Body 7. Selecting this surface. Selecting OK. And finally, let's remove this excess surface. Right click, selecting Repeat Trim. The trimming tool to be Body 9. Selecting this, left click this piece, and selecting OK. Let's patch this hole up. But first, let's stitch this bodies. Selecting Stitch. Creating a window selection, leaving the defaults. Selecting OK. Selecting this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge. Selecting Patch. Leaving the defaults once more, selecting OK. And finally, selecting Stitch. Creating a window selection to select both bodies. Leaving the defaults, selecting OK. Notice we now have two bodies. Let's now combine these two bodies into one. Hitting S for shortcuts, typing CO, and selecting Combine. Target body, any of the two will do. Let's select body 6, tool bodies to be the other body, operation join, and let's disable new component and keep tools, selecting OK. And before we apply shell, let's first apply our fillets, hitting F, selecting this 4 edges, radius to be 10, selecting OK, right click, let's repeat the fillets, selecting this edges, hitting or typing in 6, selecting OK. And finally, we can now grab our shell command, hitting S once more for shortcuts, typing SH, selecting shell, and I want to exclude this face and this face. And as mentioned in the 2D drawing, thickness to be 4. Looking nice, and selecting OK. Congratulations for completing the first phase. Moving forward, let's proceed to the second. The notable change for Phase 2 challenge is that this face will now be at an angle of 20 degrees and also having a flat surface. Recall that we initially created this feature. Let's move back in time before this feature was turned into a solid body. I'm going to head over to our timeline, select our timeline marker, left click and hold, and drag this after surface patch 1. Let me head over to our sketch 3. With sketch 3 selected, I'm going to right click and select edit sketch. Let's grab our line tool, create a line from here, going here, double left click. Let's place an angle at this line, so selecting dimension, selecting this slanted line, and searching for a reference. Left click here, place our dimension here, and key in 20. Next, let's align this endpoint with our origin. Heading to horizontal, vertical, selecting this endpoint and our origin. Feel free to define the length as well, but most importantly, this line should be way beyond this arc to the left. Let me define the height of this endpoint, hitting D once more, selecting this endpoint and our origin. The distance between the two is 20. Let's now select Finish Sketch. Recall this surface was created using sweep, and definitely we have no use for sweep now. So selecting Sweep 1, right click, and let's suppress this feature. And it's always nice to have related features close to each other. So let me move our marker up to Extrude 2. Next, let's turn on the visibility of our sketches. And I want this line to be extruded. So heading up to Create, selecting Extrude. Let's move this to the right. Let's change the direction to symmetric. And once more, our new surface body should go way past this face. I'm okay with this length. Operation New Body, selecting OK. Recall in Phase 1, Surface Stitch 2 made our surface bodies into a solid body. Let's check if this trim features has an effect if we move this marker after that solid body creation. So once more before draft 1. And notice only surface trim 4 has an effect. With that in mind, let's move forward by trimming surfaces. But first, let me turn off the visibility of our sketches. Selecting trim. My trimming tool to be this latest surface, and I want these pieces to be removed. Selecting OK. Let's repeat trim, right click, selecting trim. I want this piece to be removed. Body 1 to be our trimming tool and selecting this piece. Selecting OK. And finally, let's select stitch. Creating a window selection to select all these 3 surface bodies. Leaving the defaults, selecting OK. Next, let's grab our patch command, selecting these edges. Once more, leaving the defaults, selecting OK. And finally, let's stitch these 2 surface bodies up, selecting stitch, creating a window selection, selecting OK. It's now a solid body. Next, let's head back to our marker and move back in time to where our second solid body was created. So it's right after surface stitch 4. Grabbing our marker, left click and hold, release. Let's turn off the visibility of our second body. And now, hit S for shortcuts, and our intent here is to add a draft. Selecting draft, the type to be parting line. Let's start off by identifying the target faces, left click. Selecting this face, and this face. For the pull direction, let's select our XY plane. For the parting tool, I'm going to select this edges, making sure tangent chain is selected. And for the draft sides, I'm going to change this to symmetric. Heading to top view, and let's inspect by turning on the visibility of our sketches. Turning this body off, on to check. We're right on track. Selecting OK. And let's turn off the visibility of our sketches and turn on the visibility of our second body. Next, we're going to delete the portion of a body 12 using the face of a body 16. I'm going to select this face, hit E for extrude. Let's move this arrow up, change the operation to cut, and for the distance, let's have this at all. Making sure objects to cut is a body 12, selecting OK. And now let's move our marker to where we have combined these 2 bodies. Let me drag this to the And unfortunately, this 4 features has no effect. So let's redo the operations, hitting S for shortcuts and typing CO, selecting combine, selecting body 16 for target body, body 12 for tool bodies, operation to be joined, disabling new component and keep tools, selecting OK. Let's check if we're right on track. I'm going to top view and notice at this area over here we have something missing. And the one that is missing is to apply a draft on both of these faces. And before we apply a draft, let's first apply fillets. Hitting F for fillet, selecting this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge. The radius to be 10, selecting OK. Let's now hit S for shortcuts, typing DR, selecting draft. For the type, it will be parting line. Let's define the faces, which is this face and this face. For the parting tool, it will be this edges. And for the pull direction, let's select our XY plane. And let's make sure this line is pointing downward by selecting flip pull direction. Parting line type to be fixed. Draft sides to be one side. Let's inspect, heading to top view and selecting OK. And finally, we can apply the fillets, selecting this edge. And for the radius, it will be 6. Inspecting and selecting OK. And finally, let's apply the shell. Hitting S for shortcuts, typing SH, and selecting shell. Let's exclude this face and this face. Thickness to be 4. And selecting OK. And congratulations for completing the phase 2 of the SOLIDWORKS Model Mania Challenge year 2004. This is one of the most enjoyable challenge I made so far. Curious to know your version for this? Thanks for watching and see you in the next Model Mania made in Fusion 360.